will control the vertical.
Welcome to Anthologic, the TV anthology podcast. I am your host, Mark. Anthologic is a podcast dedicated to exploring the good, the bad, and the odd of horror, science fiction, and the best of mystery suspense anthology shows and series on TV. Join me as we slip through the cracks of reality to approach the extremes of experience, where we can peruse the stories and art of a sinister fairground of strange and wonderful rides. And now we go on to the show that is the focus of this particular episode. Welcome to this episode of Anthologic with your host Mark. Today we're covering an episode of the Twilight Zone. It's season 1, episode 22. Famous episode, possibly one of the most famous episodes of the Twilight Zone. I personally think it's the second most famous one after Time Enough at Last, which is the one with Burgess Meredith, where he's a guy, a bookworm who loves reading books, who finds himself at the end of the world with a vault full of books, but there's a twist in the tale. That one, I've already covered it. That's a great one too. But this Monsters Over Maple Street, I had high expectations going into this one because, I've heard it rated so well. And I'd never seen it before, saw it, was not disappointed. It definitely lived up. I can see why it's considered that. It was really effective. Rod Serling wrote this, directed by Ronald Wilson. Now, Rod Serling was basically filtering many of his concerns about humanity throughout the Twilight Zone. In this one, he's sort of uncovering the details around mob mentality and, when the mob starts to act. He had apparently tried to write dramas based on real stories about when a mob mentality kicks off, specifically about a lynching of a young black boy who, but he just couldn't get it on network TV, so he had to sort of filter his sensibilities, his issues into the Twilight Zone using allegory and sort of metaphor, rather than sort of being sort of direct historical takes of time, which gives it this Twilight Zone that air of longevity and sort of timelessness that kind of works well. Obviously, it isn't entirely timeless; it's very 50s and 60s, but in many respects, but in many ways, the stories are timeless, and they've been retold successfully too. So yeah. Now, this one, interestingly, doesn't have a particularly main character. I guess if there is a main character, it's Claude Akins as Steve Brand, but he's not really that. The street and the surroundings and the sort of mob are the characters in this one. It was filmed in the back lot, and it shows you how useful that is in something like Twilight Zone, because it appears to be on location, but it is in a back lot. And there's quite a lot of big cast. Usually there's only a few in an episode, 3 or 4 characters in an episode. But we got 15 or 20 characters, really, in this. And the reason one of the reasons that was needed for this is because the blame ping-pongs around the community. And with too few characters, that would be a bit wearing. But though it could work, if you watch something like Treasure of Sierra Madre, you can see when only a few characters who are paranoid about each other start to interact, you kind of see this. And this has shades of Treasure of Sierra Madre and other ones where people are in a small place and kind of start blaming each other. I think things like Quentin Tarantino's Hateful Eight are kind of riffing on the same premise, and you can think other things that Stephen King's story and film The Mist is a bit like that, and stuff like that. So essentially, it's very simple. All these people living in this little cul-de-sac, Maple Street, suddenly there's a weird noise above them, and they think they see something in the sky, maybe a meteor, and then the lights go out, and the fact the lights have gone out starts to slowly wear on them. Well, no, actually not slowly, quickly wear on them. And then a kid starts talking about, oh, it's like the movies, like the stories, where the UFOs come down and they isolate people and they're coming to get them. And this really starts to spiral of paranoia. One particular character gets isolated fairly quickly because he's a little different looking from the rest. He's tall and thin, fairly angular. The character's name is Les Goodman, but played by Barry Atwater. And he gets kind of the first one singled out because people say, oh, I've seen him go out at night looking at the stars on his porch in the middle of the night. But he says, yeah, I'm guilty of insomnia. That's what I'm guilty of. And that spirals because his car, and only his car starts, where everyone else is, nothing is working. We kind of see that set up. We see a bloke with a hammer kind of fixing something, and he says, I'm going to go to the next street and see what's going on. We see the guy with his hammer in a special pouch on his belt sort of walk off. And it gets dark and the paranoia grows. And there's one particular guy, I can't remember the actor, but he's a portly actor who is the one who rabble-rouses the most out of all of this. Charlie Farnsworth is the name of that character, played by Jack Weston. They kind of, the crowd turn, and then the blame ping-pongs around. At one point, the kid is blamed. He's the one who talked about UFOs. Maybe he knows something. They all start chasing this poor kid, and then things start getting thrown through windows and so on. Now, the one kind of voice of reason in this is Claude Akins' character, Steve Brand, who tries to sort of look, we haven't got any evidence for this. This is ridiculous. And then they start to blame him because he's the one saying that. It's kind of a real blame. Now, you've got to remember, this was made towards the tail end of things like the McCarthy witch hunts and, where there was this air of you got to be careful what you say and you're kind of expected to sort of dob out other people to preserve your own well-being. So there was that kind of in the air. But, and UFOs and aliens were the sort of source of the potential paranoia. But, it's an allegory. It could be any source. And indeed, this was kind of remade successfully quite a number of years later, but they changed it to not be aliens, but a military experiment to see how civilians interact in a crisis. And also there's kind of shades of terrorism and things like that built into that. So, the issues are kind of broadly the same, but the fear of something, that something can be altered, But essentially, it's yourselves that are to blame when it comes to mob mentality. It's kind of an analysis of that. Pretty good. I have to say, Claude Akins has got some pedigree in genre TV. He played General Aldo in one of the Planet of the Apes films, and I think, and that was kind of similar. He also was the sheriff in Kolchak, The Night Stalker, the first film. It's kind of interesting to see him in that. And also, talking of which, Barry Atwater was the vampire, the very effective vampire in The Night Stalker. So those two actually appear in the Night Stalker movie in different characters, obviously. And also, Barry Atwater has to be noted. He's kind of famous in Star Trek lore, because in one episode he played a character called Surak, who was the father of the modern thinking Vulcan of using logic and removing emotions from the thought processes. Surak was, and he played that character. So it's kind of interesting to not see these guys go into other things, and they're kind of striking. You can kind of see it was successful. This spirals into tragedy and mayhem, and at the end we pull away from the street. We see there's an optical effect, unusual in Twilight Zone. We see the street as a much broader canvas of other streets, and we see two aliens observing them, sort of saying, yes, whenever we do this to them and isolate them, they start turning on each other, and they talk about they've replicated the experiment many times. There are many Maple Streets over and over this happens. We see these aliens who are human looking. They're also wearing these sort of spaceship outfits that are apparently borrowed from the film Fantastic Voyage, and indeed we see a shot of the spaceship flying away as a saucer, which was from the Fantastic Forbidden Planet, but they just turned it upside down and reversed the footage to make it look a little different. So we're actually probably seeing the underside of the spaceship, which is represented as the top side, and so on. But it doesn't matter; it's a spaceship. So that's how it goes. An interesting piece. Interestingly, it was filmed on the sets of the lot was often used for the Andy Hardy series, a very sort of homespun Americana kind of series, and it was kind of turning that on its head too, because this is Americana, but the dark side of Americana, sort of the underside. So I kind of liked the whole vibe. Great episode all round. Really effective. Really enjoyed it. I have to say the remastered version looks pristine, very sharp, really nice, really enjoyable. So and apparently this has been delivered as plays. This has often been adapted as a play by amateur groups and so on, because it's a kind of short, effective one. So how about that? So yeah, great episode. The Monsters of Due on Maple Street did not disappoint, I have to say. So that's it from me for this time. But before I go, may I ask, is anybody out there?
Bueno.
We now return control of your television set to you until next week at this same time, when the control voice will take you to